We go live to the United Nations. The representative of Azerbaijan speaks at the 24th plenary meeting on the need to end the U.S. blockade against Cuba.
Presence of and extend our warmest welcome to His Excellency Mr. Bruno Rodriguez Parilla, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Cuba. We are also grateful to the Secretary General for his report on this important issue contained in document A/78/84. Mr. President, the General Assembly has expressed its overwhelming support for and solidarity with the people and government of Cuba through its principled position in favor of the resolution calling for the lifting of the embargo imposed by the United States against the sovereign country. At the 77th session of the General Assembly, the overwhelming majority of member states voted in favor of the resolution A/77/7. In this regard, the non-aligned movement reiterates its strongest opposition for the promulgation and imposition of unilateral coercive measures that are not authorized by the relevant organs of the United Nations and that are inconsistent with the principles of international law or the Charter of the United Nations, given their extraterritorial implications and illegal character. The non-aligned movement has repeatedly emphasized its call on the U.S. government to put an end to the unilateral economic, commercial, and financial embargo that it has illegally maintained against Cuba for more than 6 decades now. The embargo, which is a breach of international law, the Charter of the United Nations, and the norms and principles governing interstate relations, constitutes a violation of Cuba's right to fully interact with the international community. Mr. President, the non-aligned movement has historically held a principled position of rejecting unilateral coercive measures that are not authorized by the relevant organs of the United Nations, that are inconsistent with the principles of international law or the Charter of the United Nations, or that contravene the basic principles of the multilateral trading system, and that are used as a tool of political or economic and financial pressure against states, in particular developing countries. The embargo on Cuba is precisely an example of the adverse effects of unilateral coercive measures on the well-being of peoples, preventing them, among others, from fully enjoying and realizing their human rights, including the right to development. The direct and indirect damage inflicted by the embargo against Cuba is enormous. It affects all critical sectors of the Cuban economy, including public health, nutrition, agriculture, as well as trade, investment, tourism, and banking. The banking sector has been particularly hit. The persecution of Cuban financial transactions in the third country jurisdiction, which has a significant deterrent effect in economic terms, has continued. From March 1, 2022 to February 28, 2023, the blockade caused an estimated $4,867 million of damage to Cuban economy. Cuba is also denied access to markets, international aid from international financial institutions, and technology transfers, which create serious obstacles to the socio-economic development of the country. In addition, the embargo is the main impediment to broader access to the Internet, people-to-people contacts, and the development of cultural, sport, and scientific relations. The non-aligned movement reaffirms that the continuation of the embargo is totally unjustifiable, that it does not correspond with our historical time. It also runs counter to Cuba's continued effort to realize its sustainable development, including the achievement of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. The movement expresses its deep concern over the widening of the extraterritorial nature of the embargo against Cuba, including the full implementation of Chapter 3 of the Helms-Burton Act. The non-aligned movement also rejects the reinforcement of the financial measures adopted by the U.S. government to tighten the embargo, which has exceeded $1 trillion and has a direct negative impact on the daily life. Mr. President, the movement views the strengthening of the embargo against Cuba as a serious setback to the process of normalization of bilateral relations between the two countries. Furthermore, the movement strongly condemns the inclusion of the Republic of Cuba on the unilateral list of state sponsors of terrorism of the U.S. Department of State as announced on January 11, 2021. NAM rejects the politicization of the fight against terrorism, including through the unilateral adoption of lists accusing states and their constitutionally established institutions of allegedly supporting terrorism, and consequently rejects the unfounded accusations that Cuba sponsors terrorism. NAM looks forward to the current U.S. administration taking the necessary action to reverse these reckless steps and moving forward towards normalizing relations. Mr. President, the fact that 185 UN member states voted in favor of the GA Resolution 77/7 represents an expression of unanimity with the international community in demanding an end to the 61-year-long embargo and full adherence to the principles and purposes enshrined.
Currently listen to the statements of the representative of Azerbaijan who is speaking on behalf of the non-aligned movement. The representative said the non-aligned movement reiterates the rejection for the extraterritorial policy and called for its end. The representative added that the blockade violates international law. Let's continue listening to the statements.
The non-aligned movement, while reiterating its commitment to the promotion, preservation and strengthening of multilateralism, reaffirms that the full respect of the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, particularly those referring to sovereign equality, non-interference and non-intervention, is critical for the effective maintenance of international peace and security. Therefore, the international community must continue working together on the reversal and elimination of the economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed by the United States against Cuba, given inter alia its illegal character and its extraterritorial implications. I thank you, Mr. President.